Hi, everyone. Welcome. So I'll start with a question. If given a choice, would you rather give up showering or give up all animal products? Okay, save your thought on that. I'm really glad you could join us today for Designing for a Sustainable Future. And I hope that you've brought questions of your own so that we can have a thought-provoking discussion. My name's Rachel Thorley. I'm an engineering fellow here at Churchill. And the next couple of minutes, I'm going to go over a bit of housekeeping, introduce our panel, and say a few words about how this discussion topic was chosen. So firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who's made this event possible, our development team, AV for setting up this auditorium, and so that our virtual audience can also join us online. So this is a hybrid discussion. It's being both live streamed and recorded for people who can't make it today. We'll be taking questions from both the live audience and those online. So if you'd like to ask a question here in the room, can you wave your hand around? Fran is on roving mic. And if you would wait for that mic, because without it, the virtual audience will not be able to hear your question. If you're online, please just post in the chat box and we'll be manning both, so we'll get your question set out as well. It would be really helpful if you could start any question by just saying your name and your affiliation. So we'll be wrapping up about 7-ish, so that you can have a bit of a break before dinner or the wine tasting or whatever your evening has in store. So why designing for a sustainable future? I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice that we've got soaring energy prices. And although it's a bit more autumnal today, we have had some of the most extreme heat waves in UK living memory this year. Firstly, I'll introduce Dame Polly Curtis. Polly is a fellow of Churchill College and founder director of the University of Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. She serves on the board for Anglian Water and Mercedes-Benz. Polly, would you like to say a few words?
Is the mic working? Very nice to see you all here this evening. Until last year, I was the director of the Institute for Sustainability Leadership, which works predominantly with business, but also with government and the finance sector to try and build a sustainable economy. So this concept of design is fundamental to everything that we did, and the Institute still does, in thinking about how we read us into the situation we're in now, and that will get us out of the situation that we now face.
Thanks a lot, Polly. So next, can I introduce John Staton? John studied engineering at Churchill College, and during his career, he's been an engineer for a variety of F1 teams, and now works on the development of hybrid, has also worked on the development of hybrid and EV automotive. John, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes, I always enjoyed as a kid taking things apart, working out how they functioned and trying to make my own things. And so studying engineering was kind of pretty natural and came here to do it. I was sponsored through university by Rolls-Royce in Derby, gas turbine engine company. And after university went to Ricardo and engines consultancy, these days a wider consultancy in all sorts of automotive spheres. But yeah, the majority of my career, 25 years of it, I spent in 3 different Formula One teams. Williams, during a pretty good patch in the late 80s through to the late 90s. Ferrari and McLaren, working on the design and engineering development and the invention and creation of a whole load of systems, a lot of them being powertrain, but much else besides. Latterly, KERS, the energy recovery systems that were introduced into racing to try to, if not lead the way, demonstrate what could be done in the field of regular road cars to do things differently and more efficiently for the future. And then latterly, I worked for McLaren's road car division and then an EV startup until last year. And yeah, these days I'm doing various consulting jobs on new fuels and all that sort of thing. Just very quickly, if people think that Formula One is just an example of the most reckless consumption of resources, then you're right. But let me help you understand why it's still not a completely bad thing. Otherwise, I won't have earned my dinner.
You're stacking the deck for the questions, John. So next up, we've got Emma, who is a research fellow at Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. She's previously worked with several different academic institutions, NGOs, and businesses, including Microsoft and the Zoological Society. So Emma, would you want to talk a bit about your research?
Sure. Hello, good evening, everyone. So my background was in ecology and biodiversity conservation. I've moved into more social sciences and sustainable consumption. And a lot of my research has been around what works to shift behavior towards more plant-based diets, as high meat consumption, such as we have in the UK, is pretty disastrous for both climate change and biodiversity and human health as well. And I think one of the interesting things about designing a sustainable future is that we've got a lot of the technological solutions to climate change already. What we're really lacking is the political will to actually implement them. And how do we overcome, corporate lobbying and inequality and lack of political will to actually achieve this? And I think that's why social science, as much as I am a natural scientist, but this is why the social sciences are so important. And kind of more broadly, I'm really interested, how can we design society so that the most sustainable option is the cheapest, the most convenient, the most affordable, and the most accessible? If trying to make a green choice feels like you're swimming upstream, then something's wrong with the system that we're in.
Thanks, Emma. And last but not least, we've got Josephine Tumwasiga, who is a current Churchill student doing her PhD with the Sensor Centre for Doctoral Training. Josephine's got a BSc in Telecommunications Engineering from Makerere University and an MPhil in Engineering for Sustainable Development. Josephine, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you. Josephine Tumwasiga from Uganda. Makerere is in Uganda, and a background in telecommunication engineering, where I had an opportunity to work with mobile telecommunications companies to design them for Ugandan. The mobile money starts in Kenya, but for the Uganda mobile money system, which you have had as an innovation that has changed the banking system in Africa. But as part of the team, I was a bit disappointed after designing for Uganda that when we went to the rural villages, which it was actually supposed to help women or men who are doing petty jobs in the informal sector, to not carry around money, but carry it on their phones, that and not be, to avoid theft and everything, that they understood the technology and the purpose of it, but unfortunately they could not charge their phones. So it wasn't that they didn't understand the product, but we had designed it without understanding the circumstances they needed to use it, the conditions that they needed to use it. So that led me to come here and understand how do we do engineering with sustainability in future, and understanding where the product, what are you going to embed it into the environment? Does it fit in? Do we design from down, topward, not top down? And that, again, I did another research in understanding what is the impact of rural electrification to rural urban migration as a livelihood strategy for rural families, because in the families, when migrating to the urban area, it's not a choice. It is a family investing in somebody to go do well in the urban area and send money back. So if they don't, that return on investment doesn't work, then there's a problem. And again, it was still tying into my telecommunications and understanding how does that rural electrification help the design of the solutions we do. And I found some findings that I think will have some questions. And I'm back now for my PhD because I understood that also we could help using sensors, which really need low power and And again, the touch screen, because I'm still in the telecom sector, how can I design very cheap capacitive sensors like here from the touch screen technology that you're already using to help the people analyze their water and understand that it's safe to drink or not, or to analyze their soil and understand if it has the right nutrients to grow the crops they're trying to grow.
Thank you so much. So get your questions at the ready. But first, can we put our hands together to welcome our panel and thank them for coming to be with us tonight? Okay, so do we have any audience questions to start off with? Any of those introductions, but anyway, I'll just check the online queue as well. We've got a lot of interest, people introducing themselves here. Okay, well, I guess I'll start off then. So thanks for coming. So I thought we might start with a big scale question. So what do you think is the most important step needed to reach net zero? Is this even possible? So Polly, would you like to start off?
That's okay. Well, I have to say that these signs are not good at the moment. We have to face that simply because they are not backed by sufficiently detailed plans, and they're certainly not being executed with all the best will in the world that people are putting effort behind it. And the UK Climate Change Committee has just delivered its report on what's being done in the UK and have pointed out that the current plans that the UK has, even though it's one of the most ambitious sets of plans in the world, will not deliver net zero by 2050. We're only on track for 8 out of the 50 indicators, which are telling us how far we are down the line. So that's the bad news. The question is, will we ever deliver it? The answer is, the truth is, we can't afford not to. The consequences, and indeed the costs of not delivering net zero are so much greater than if we than it would cost us to deliver it, that I think in the end we will tip over. And for all that business has played such a fundamental part in causing the problem, business is now pushing government very, very hard to take action. I don't know whether any of you saw the letter that was in fact managed by the Institute for Sustainability Leadership just this week to the UK government, saying you cannot fail now to keep the pressure up for delivering net zero, to get us to the level that we need to get to by 2030, and to go beyond to get to 2050 on with every ounce of effort available. And just to put a more positive spin on it, I think it is one of the most exciting design challenges that we face in any that I can ever remember throughout my entire career. It means that we have to completely transform the whole global economy. We have to completely rethink not just how we produce and use energy, but all our industrial processes, where we live, how we travel, what we eat. And this is one of Emma's very hugely important contributions, how we use land, what we do about waste. All of these things have to be fundamentally rethought. And importantly, it is absolutely doable. There are some big challenges to make it happen, but it is possible. As Emma said, we know what to do. The question is whether we can actually get the momentum behind it, behind what is an absolutely non-negotiable requirement.
Thanks. Emma, have you got something to say on this?
Well, many thoughts. I guess the kind of how do we reach net zero is, I know, as Polly has said, it is quite simple. We've got to stop using fossil fuels and electrify everything, and quite possibly nuclear as well. And we need to hugely ramp down animal agriculture, both because of methane emissions and the amount of land use that takes that could otherwise be sequestering carbon. On a personal level, I agree with Polly, we can't afford not to reach net zero, but I think we need to be very clear. There are some businesses that can't afford for us to reach net zero. There's a small minority of people who stand to, continuing to make a lot of money from fossil fuels. And so I really understand there's a lot of narrative from everyone saying, look, climate change is going to affect everyone. This is going to affect all of us. And on one level, I agree with that. But to generalize massively, essentially, the older and richer you are, the less consequences you face from climate breakdown. And I think there are some people who've looked at the evidence and decided, I'd rather pay a lower rate of income tax than have a sort of safer future for people. And I think with that kind of mindset and that morality, which I completely disagree with, I think in some ways it's quite a logical response. So I think we need to be really kind of pushing back on that and saying, look, for the 99% of us, this we can't afford not to, and we're not letting kind of your greed and convenience override this. And so there's lots of, it's really great for businesses to, reach net zero. This will be really, really good for businesses. Yeah, for some, but not for all of them. And so I think this is why we need such a kind of societal wide response of saying, no, these actions, that's not immoral. We're removing your social license to do that. We say no. So join climate protests, perhaps how we help get to net zero.
Thanks for that. So John, you might be able to address this from a bit more of a technological angle. Is net zero possible?
Yes, I think so, but with a lot of reservations. And I think that whilst it shouldn't stop the work that is, which is massive in its complexity and just the volume needed to achieve it, shouldn't stop us beginning. But you do need acknowledgement and you need cooperation. And the thing that worries me is that whilst, maybe as an island, we could say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to carry it out this way and we're going to suffer whilst we get to the goal, suffer in the sense of accept that not everything will be as comfy as it once was whilst we make the transition. I fear that that's going to be difficult to reconcile with what's going on everywhere else. But I still think we should lead by good example, and not wait for everybody else. So if there are countries in the world still building 25 coal-fired power stations every month or whatever it is, we don't wait until that's stopped. We just get on and show how things can be done better and differently. And I think the cooperation aspect can take many forms, to the extent that if solutions are found and methods of doing things which weren't evident at the point we started, then we just get on and share them. Maybe like creating a vaccine for a worldwide disease. Although that's maybe not the best example because it hasn't worked perfectly, but there's been a degree of cooperation and sharing, which is a lot better than just doing your own thing and saying to hell with everybody else.
Thanks, John. Josephine, drawing on your experience of sustainable development, can you weigh in the net zero question?
Like everybody here, I'm optimistic that it can happen, but I think the biggest challenge right now is the different levels of development and need. Yeah, the UK is reached somewhere and can try to push for, no fossil fuels. But if you look at India or my country, Uganda, the needs are completely different and the development level is completely different. So as John just said, there are projects right now of just extracting, fuel from the ground right now in Uganda happening. And for you could say it's, naive to do that at this point, but if you ask also, they could give you reasons of why at that development stage we are at, it makes sense. So I think the biggest challenge, it can happen and it will take a lot of international cooperation, everybody to weigh in. But the biggest challenge I could say to it now is the different needs and development levels of different countries.
Can you just add one?
Absolutely, go for it.
I think that's a really important point, and that is that where the development needs are is not always where the capital is available. I mean, they've estimated that you will need to invest in the region of $9 trillion every year to put in place what is going to be needed to make this transition to a zero carbon economy. And the big challenge is who pays and how do you distribute that revenue so that it actually delivers to the countries who need it most, but you didn't cause the problem in the first place. So that is a real issue around driving those big, and the truth is, although there will be winners and losers in the corporate sector, I think the vast majority of big companies know that they have to move on this, not least because there's something there are trillions of dollars of opportunity for companies who do respond. So we have to lose some. It's no doubt that we'll have to lose some sectors will be the losers, but there are many. The opportunities that are out there gives me some hope that the corporate sector is going to be more on the side of delivering the solution than try to hang on to. There'll be some who want to make the last buck they possibly can before the drawbridge comes down, but the drawbridge will come down. And the question is, how do we get there fast enough?
I'm just waiting for the drawbridge to come down though, like, because global emissions have kind of increased year on year. I think 2020 had a bit of a dip, and because the entire global economy shut down. So I mean, I hope so, but I think I'm just not assuming that, oh, they're going to have to do this. It's like, no, we need to make them have to do this. It's not a kind of inevitable consequence. And slightly responding to both Josephine and John's comments, I'm sure lots of us have come across a kind of climate action pushback of like, oh, China and coal powered fire stations. And yes, China's emissions per person have, and total have really increased over the last few decades. They're still much lower than the UK's per person.
The trouble is, I'm not sure who's going to make them do it. We have such a catastrophic failure of global governance in solving just about any problem we face anywhere in the world, that this notion that somehow we have to actually get them on board to work collaboratively in partnership in forms of enlightened self-interest. We can't even stop the war in Ukraine. What makes us think we're going to be able to stop global warming? And we're going to have to do it by finding a way through, not making people do things, would be my debate.
I'll just make another point on technical approach and solutions. It's net zero, where we mean we don't put any more carbon into the atmosphere than we take out. So if you decide to light a fire, cut a tree down, light a fire to keep yourself warm, as long as you don't light another fire to keep yourself warm before the next tree has grown and taken all that carbon back in, you're all right. Now that example is obviously absurd, but I don't. I think we should. I'm not a defender of the liquid fuel, gasoline, petrol, or paraffin, or whatever else engine, just because I've worked in automotive field for most of my career. But I think we should be mindful not to throw good things away. So we've generated a lot of technology in using combustible fuels to propel ourselves. And I don't discount the idea, and there are people working on it. There are people working on it in this university. The idea of making carbon liquid fuels that can be burned, but on a scale that is such, and taking carbon out of the atmosphere in so doing, that you've got a net zero effect. Now it brings, or it leaves you with loads of the problems we've got today, and which started manifesting themselves in the 70s, like smogs and pollution in towns, oxides of nitrogen, for the fact that you're burning air which is 80% nitrogen. It doesn't get rid of any of that problem, but if it stopped the mean world temperature going up to 38 degrees C, it would be quite a neat opportunity. And I think we shouldn't discount many different strands from contributing to where we eventually get to. And some of them might be steps on the way that aren't ultimately sustained. But yeah, and I'm not talking about growing sugarcane and making bioethanol. I'm talking about something more.
Growing algae?
Something much more dense in terms of the scale at which you can do it. And I'm kind of hopeful that there'll be some developments and some findings that make something that sounds a bit like science fiction today, some kind of reality. But as I say, it leaves you with many of the problems we've had for decades, such as pollution, such as respiratory diseases and so on. But it's quite ambitious to say we'll fix the whole lot in one method, in one approach.
No.
Thanks for that, John. Have we got any more follow-up? Because I've got that links to a question we've had from Nigel, who is asking, if you could change one thing to accelerate the change required, what would it be and why? And I think that ties in really nicely with probably your point on redesigning and transforming the whole global economy. I thought maybe you could answer it each from your area of expertise, like economy, transport, food, perhaps development, or technology. So that was, if you could change one thing to accelerate the change required, what would it be and why? Do you want to start off, Emma?
I'm happy to start. So this isn't my area, so this is slightly cheating, but I would say just get fossil fuel money out of politics. I don't know if anyone's been following the US congressional hearings of just how much influence fossil fuels have in political decision making in a number of countries. In terms of my actual field, which is sustainable food research, I think kind of reforming agricultural subsidies so that, again, the healthiest, most sustainable foods, which are broadly like a mostly plant-based diet, that's affordable and delicious and convenient and accessible to everyone. So that would be my two things.
That's allowed. Josephine.
Mine could be political buy-in. Even if we don't, the second, of course, very closely with behavior change for us, the ones who demand for the energy. But however much behavior change we choose to, and if our leaders don't buy into that, there's not going to be any change. At least in the majority of countries, the political side, global or local, has to buy in to make those changes happen. Or else, only other changes, they decide the policies, academia or whatever professions advise people could change. But if the political party decides no, it's not going to happen. So for me, it could be the political buy-in.
Polly, if you got anything on this?
Well, I'm struggling actually. I mean, I think one of the things about sustainability is that you have to look at the whole system. So it's really, really hard to pick off one thing and say, I'll change that, because everything you touch has consequences in some other place. And so I find it very, very hard to say I would change one thing. I would love to change the way our political systems work, but I suppose, so yes, I agree that's important. For me, I suppose one of the things which I would like to change is the way we understand our relationship with nature. I just think it's only beginning to dawn on us now that our relationship with nature is not one of stewardship or us being kind of protecting it. We need, at the very least, we need to restore the damage that we've done and realize that we have to live in harmony with nature. And it's extraordinary how few people really understand what that means in reality. So I would change the way we educate people to think about nature.
Thanks for that. John, how about you?
Well, it might be as unrealistic as trying to get fossil fuel money and influence out of government and politics, but in a similar way, I'd like to think that there was a better way in which you could have plans and projects for the long-term good of a nation and a people, whether that's how you transport them, whether it's how you house them, whether it's how you cure them if they're sick, or how you deal with the climate and the energy crisis. I'd like to think that there was a way to have to have a system that did not depend on which way the wind blew every 4 years or sooner, and that was in some way, if not independent, but protected from the whims of government. Because what you need, if you're going to have a really difficult challenge, if you've got a really difficult challenge to solve, one thing that really helps is if it's clear what the goals are and what the rules of engagement are and what you're allowed to do. And just take an example of a friend, a contemporary of mine here, who started a company doing solar thermal heating, serpentine copper pipes in panels on roofs generating hot water. You can harness 85% of the incident energy on the panel and turn it into hot water. Brilliant. He was making a really good business of this. And by comparison, a photovoltaic array of the same area, or irrespective area, will harness, at the time it was about 20%, maybe up to 25% of the incident energy. So you need quite a lot more area for a given amount of energy harness. But the government introduced a feed-in tariff where you could collect your solar energy and squirt the power into the grid rather than make your kettle boil. And that just finished his business doing the solar thermal, which to me as the engineer, given the rate of capture, is a really nice idea. You can't do everything with hot water in the same way that you maybe can with electricity. You can't drive your lawnmower on hot water, say. But the point is that if there's some consistency of the theme and the rules of engagement, and you give people a chance of developing something to a point where it's even better than it is early on, and you don't know what you're then going to be able to go on to do further than that. And I was talking about it with my wife in the car on the way here. If you, let's say you can't put your energy into the grid, but it's a really hot day, a really bright day, and you've got loads of energy coming in, what do you do with it? Well, you store it in a battery. So where do you get the battery from? Why is it a good idea to have a battery in every house when there's a battery more centrally that can be fed to via the grid, albeit with losses? So these are things that need to be thought through and planned. As a nation, I don't think in our government we have a chief engineer. I think that would be a really good idea. You've got a chief scientist. You've got
Probably would be.
Yeah, you've got a chief scientist. You've got
medical officer.
Yeah. You've got an attorney general. You've got where's the chief engineer? Do we have chief scientists? I'm not sure, but
so we've got some comeback from the audience, I think. Fran, would you be able to bring the mic over?
Thank you. Jonathan Evans. I was a former student here as well, and my business manufactures parts for the construction industry and the automotive sector. So two polar opposites when it comes to looking at sustainability. My question was about the first word of the title, designing for a sustainable future, and what does that entail? My philosophy has always been that industries generally don't do anything unless it's either legally required or it's more profitable. So we take the view in our business that whatever material that you choose to use for your designs and so on, our determination is to use as little of it as possible, both from the point of view of things like circularity, embodied carbon and so on, but also that makes it cheaper. And ultimately, that's usually the biggest driver. So what will make companies design for a more sustainable future, and how should they go about it, do you think?
Great question. So who wants to pick that up first? What will make companies design for a sustainable future?
I could make a very general remark rather than specific about design, because I think what's really interesting, and I don't want to come across as the kind of apologist for the corporate sector, because they do need to be challenged constantly and driven hard to go beyond just working for to the rule of law and profit. And I think there is a huge movement now which is taking root for companies to think more widely about their purpose. Not just because they have to by law, but because there is a growing sense that they have to protect their license to operate by being better able to demonstrate that they contribute long-term value to society and the environment, and not just to their shareholders. And I think there's a lot of evidence that companies who do that, who try to be net positive, are attracting better talent. They have better, if they're in the consumer area, they get more customers choosing their products over others. So I think there are pressures on companies to go way beyond pure profit and law. And I mean, I could name you half a dozen companies who've really, Unilever being the most classic example, who've really increased the value of the company by focusing on the purpose of the company being to serve society and not just their shareholders. Now, that's a nice dream, but I think it is increasingly becoming an expectation.
John, do you want to pick this one up?
Can I throw the question back at you? So, if there was a material from which you make some beam for putting buildings up, or a constituent of concrete or something, where a resource somewhere in the world was just being milked mercilessly without any consideration of the damage locally or whatever, but it was the cheapest and the best thing for you to make part. I'm just wondering what you expect. I don't want to say regulation, because the regulation is always behind the creativity of the people. If I think about the field where I worked for so long, technical regulations that say the car shall not be longer than this or wider than this. They're very simple geometric ones, but other things determining what the technical makeup of the car is. Never ever stopped people doing something better. What they usually did was just encourage them to do something better, less efficiently, because you have a certain avenue closed off to you that otherwise would have yielded you a bigger improvement for the same amount of effort or expensive materials or whatever. But I'm I'm not really sure. I'm tempted to say regulation, but it presupposes that everything about the raw materials and the processes that are used for any given any given industry.
Yeah, well, a good example springs to mind would be timber frame construction. Mass timber is the big thing at the moment. People building multi-story buildings and so on out of cross-laminated timber structures. And 50% of the projects that start off well-meaning, trying to sequester carbon into these structures and so on, get about as far as the budget stage, and then the client decides, oh, well, maybe not after all. And we do have regulating specific choices of materials is something our government in particular really doesn't like doing. It generally leaves it to the market. And I agree, Polly, I think there are lots of opportunities, and there's always a sector of every market who will choose the premium product if it's better for the environment and so on. But the hard reality of a tough commercial environment, such as the construction or the automotive sectors are at the moment, if it's 5% more expensive, you'll struggle to sell it. It will be a niche product all the time until you regulate it. The interesting change I think we're seeing at the moment is that embodied carbon always used to be seen as something like a soft driver and a nice to have, but actually embodied carbon now is manifesting itself in the cost of energy to produce the materials. And that's having a real impact on the materials and the choices we're seeing. So actually materials that are taking a lot of resources and energy to produce are actually just becoming more expensive in terms of the cost of implementing those. So that's driving change in itself. So I believe that energy should be expensive, and that in itself will drive better choices and more efficient materials.
Thanks for that. We've got another question that leads into this, what you were talking about, premium products. And it's what do you consider to be the most important factor in design, sustainability or durability? So I think probably Josephine, would you have an example that you could bring in for this?
Well,
and while you're thinking, that question is from Jose Divo Bressan at the University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. So we have a very wide audience here today.
Well, durability, I could think is still under sustainability, because if you're going to produce something sustainable, you're thinking that it should, like if it's a product, it should serve its life cycle, and then you should also, that means a longer life cycle. That's what we're trying to aim for, that the products have a longer life cycle, and that to happen, it should be durable for that life cycle. And then after the life cycle, that it still can be repurposed for some other use. And for, again, that to happen, it should have been durable from the start. So I think sustainability is the key, and then durability is a subset of sustainability. So sustainability should be the path, what you're looking for.
Thanks for that, Emma.
Just hello to Brazil. Thanks for joining us. I just completely agree with Josephine. I think that's a really good question. And I think I use the word sustainability a lot. We're all using it a lot, but of course, there's lots and lots of different ways of measuring this. I think greenhouse gas emissions is key, land use, but there's, plastic pollution, microplastics are things which people also, are also important environmental issues. And if you compare the amount of resources going into, a cotton canvas bag compared to a plastic bag, the plastic bag has a much, much smaller footprint on that, but you can perhaps only use it kind of once or twice, a sort of single-use bag, compared to being able to reuse something over and over again. And I think I find this a really interesting concept, because this doesn't really cross over to food. You can't keep reusing a portion of chickpeas over and over again, like you can with a bag or kind of other items. And I think I really recommend the book Donut Economics, and she talks a lot about circularity. So we need to think about how we're making these products, but also at the end of their life, how can they be reused used again. If you've got a really complex composite material that you can't sort of break down, looking over to the engineers, this is way outside my field. But yes, how can we have things lasting for as long as possible? I mean, that's not very good for economic growth, which in terms of how we consider how we're doing as a society, GDP growth is perhaps not so good, because if you buy something once and you don't have to buy it again, that's good for the planet. Not so good for various other economic metrics. But yeah, durability, absolutely key.
I'll just add one rider to that. You have to use a cotton shopping bag 30,000 times before it's the equivalent of one plastic bag.
On what basis?
Not, so there's been a lot of, if that's the stat I'm thinking of, there was some weird ways they calculated that. They were looking at kind of ozone layer, the way they amalgamated it. So I think it's in the sort of like hundreds, not thousands.
Okay. Hundreds.
So they do reuse
even
them.
makes the point that we have to look very carefully at these concepts of durability before we just take it as being a primary goal of a product design. But that's
absolutely,
recyclability for me would be better than durability as
well. That's the other end of it, isn't it? If you end up with something which you can never destroy and never use, so you've just got to stick it in a hole and leave it there and hope it doesn't cause any problem to other life, then it's not all about what is the energy content or the material content to create the thing.
There's been a bit of an issue with bags for life, and I should preface this with I'm very anti-single-use plastic bags, but it was an issue. People were getting, paying the 10p for the stronger bags, but then they were just piling up at home. So you had a whole lot more resource, a whole lot more energy going into making these more durable bags. So I think, is it Patagonia said the most sustainable product is the one that you don't buy? So just really thinking, how can we reverse consumerism, I suppose.
Thanks for that. We've got some more audience coming back. So Fran, could you bring the mic over to the far side? Well, let's take them in turn. Thanks for that, Emily. Great points.
My name's Andrew Ball, a former undergraduate here from 1990. Do you see a role for an advanced solar power source that could be available 24/7 as part of the energy mix going forward?
What is an advanced solar power source? Can I ask?
I'll give you a hint. My current affiliation is the European Space Agency. So
okay.
So some kind of beaming to Earth,
correct?
Really concentrated. Yeah, I would have said so.
I have no idea.
Sounds like it might be a complicated solution when there may be simpler ones available to us, but that's on the basis of a complete non-expert on the subject.
Launch costs are coming down and robotics technology is getting much more advanced. And so it's something that we think could be investigated on the horizon as part of the energy mix, as part of sustainability.
Terrific. Watch this space literally.
So this is something which means that you've always got a cloudless sky in effect by sticking something up in a place. And
wouldn't it just be easier to put them in the Sahara, like solar panels?
During the night, of course, they're not generating electricity, and you're taking lands that could be used for other things, agriculture, reforestation, etc.
I would generally, land use is a really, really important point and agree with. I think but in terms of if the relevant countries are willing, certain the stats of there are places on Earth which don't compete for other land uses in the same way that could do a lot for solar panels. But of course, big issues of geopolitics, but that would also apply to things in space, I assume.
Thanks for that. A great question. So we had another question from the audience.
Thank you. My name's David King. I was fortunate enough to be an undergraduate here in 1961. So you'll appreciate from that I'm retired and have been for a number of years. To keep my brain active in retirement, I joined what's called a U3A. For those that don't know, it's an organisation for retired people to help you keep learning. And I went to a talk recently on manufacture of batteries for electric cars. And the speaker was talking about to make a battery, you have to get raw materials, some of which are only available in South America, others in Africa. The vast majority of batteries are made in China. And when you take into account the carbon cost of all this mining, manufacturing, distribution, the punchline was, if you buy an electric car, it's going to take you 10 years to put back into the environment what you've taken out. Is that true?
Well, John, can we give you that one?
I can't agree with or refute the figures because I honestly don't know, but it is vitally important that in any calculation you do of the effect, positive or negative, on some piece of machinery or some piece of manufacture, that you do the so-called cradle to grave analysis. And the other thing is, if you're digging up lithium or rare earth materials for making special magnets and so on, how do you rate the damage of that compared with the benefit that you've thrown away the petrol or the diesel engine? And it's part of the reason I have seen some analysis that I've not been able myself to corroborate, that says that generating a lithium-ion battery pack for an electric vehicle is not orders of magnitude, or even one order of magnitude, more damaging than the energy content in making a regular metal car with a piston engine. But it is important. And then what do you do with the battery when it's spent? Because there are very complex electrochemistries in the batteries, and you don't just heat the thing up, melt it, and separate the iron from the lead from the aluminium or whatever. So I think that is very important. And another thing is that some of the rare earths, some of the things like lithium, and even copper, of which you need quite a lot to make a lot of motors, you can't dig them up everywhere. So yes, you're then putting yourself at the mercy of the territory or the owner, or the most practical and viable mines to generate the material. So it's not. I don't think I'm not convinced that electric vehicles are or electric propulsion is the only way we should be working. And I think some of it will come out in the wash as we go on. And it's why I made that comment earlier about synthetic fuels, where the carbon cycle has been closed. And hopefully, in the course of the learning that you might make in achieving that end, you'd then be able to sequester carbon, not necessarily to make the fuel, but just to get it out and try and pull the carbon levels in the atmosphere down to something rather less scary. Maybe even to the levels they were at the turn of the last century, let alone pre-industrial revolution. But
thanks, Jen. I mean, thinking of that history of the car, I mean, could there be another way? Emma?
I've been waiting for cars to come up in this discussion, so I'm delighted that they have. One very quick question for John. In terms of, you talk about synthetic fuels, are you using electricity to make the synthetic fuels? How are you making them?
I don't know. That's for the chemists and the scientists to figure out. But I mean, hope. So you take ground source or air source heat pumps. Okay, so free energy. Apparently, you need electricity. And most heat pump systems, ground source, air source, have a coefficient of performance, which is the ratio of the amount of energy that they can produce, heating effect. Let's say if you want to heat your building, with the amount of electricity that you have to put in. But if you use a kilowatt, or if you have to have a kilowatt supplying of electricity supplying a pump to generate 4 kilowatts of heating, say, then that's still better than what might have been 5 kilowatts of electric heating, which you'd been getting from a coal-fired power station or whatever. So you won't get everything in one go, and there's no magic, and we're not going to design perpetual motion machines.
No.
So again, it's well, how do you peg things right back, even if not to a point of perfection, but to a point where the rate at which you're increasing the damage is reducing. You're still increasing the damage, but the rate at which you're increasing it is reducing.
So I'm not familiar with synthetic fuels, so this is way outside my field, and I don't know what the numbers are. If you do need electricity to make them, I would say just use the electricity sort of directly, but again, kind of not my area. So thank you for the question about electric cars. So in terms of the embodied emissions and energy into making an electric car, that is higher than a conventional one. It rapidly pays off that difference, because if you buy a petrol or diesel car, those emissions increase every year as you're driving it, of course. Whereas for an electric car, all of that emissions is in the making of it. They go up very, very, very shallowly, and that depends on your electricity mix. However, so electric cars are better, but cars aren't a good option for our transport needs. They take up huge amounts of land. They're really inefficient. So you're single-use cars, you're kind of driving around with, two sofas and this huge sort of metal frame, for one small person. And we didn't always have such a car-dependent society as we do now. I mean, John's made some points about we've got this technology from sort of fuels that we should keep on using. The first electric train, if I remember this correctly, was 1870s. We've had electric vehicles for a very, very long time. There's photos of 1920s UK Victorian women on electric scooters. I don't think that was photoshopped. I'd have to sort of double check. But there's a lot of these solutions have been around for a really, really long time. And yes, we need a whole lot of different things, and maybe hydrogen and batteries, but electricity is remarkable. So what we need is, massively reduce car dependency. I biked across Cambridge to get here this evening, and it was just really stressful trying to navigate between these massive SUVs on sort of crowded roads. There's often discussions about, in the countryside, bikes are slowing down cars. In a city, it's the cars slowing me down, and I really resent this. So we need much, much better mass transit, more trains, more accessible trains, much more wheelchair spaces, more bike spaces, more pushchair spaces, so that if you've got a whole lot of luggage you need to take with you, you don't think, I have to take the car. You think, I can fit this on a train. A really, really interesting point about the different minerals in different places and having to transport those. So yes, that is entirely true. The amazing thing about wind turbines and solar panels is you transport them once, and then they're there, and then they keep producing energy for you. 40% of global shipping is transporting fossil fuels around, because you have to keep on transporting it, because you keep on using it. So that makes you extra vulnerable to supply chains, as recent world events have really powerfully demonstrated with gas. So every different option we're considering does have some sort of environmental or ecological impact, as you've sort of pointed out. And so we need to think, how can we meet people's needs and our transport needs and our food needs for everyone? What are the best options, sort of given different trade-offs? But that's another really exciting thing about renewable energy. Just we immediately get rid of 40% of global shipping.
Thanks for that answer, Emma. So I know a few things came up there about use of electricity and the contrast between rural and urban areas. And Josephine, I thought you might have something to add on the benefits of electrification or future for transport and equality in rural versus urban.
Yeah, again, from my perspective, it comes down again to what country you're talking about. When you're talking about the UK, yes, you're somewhere, but again, even if I don't claim, my last lecture of climate change showed that even the UK, the energy mix, the renewables are insignificant. So for even by 2050, you cannot go electric cars, because the power again will come from coal or something, which is still a fossil fuel. So then when you come to my country, actually, Africa, you could find that actually we could get faster there, because most, other than people who are privileged to have the national grid, most places don't have the national grid. So they have a solar panel on top of your house or in your garden, and practically it charges your phone or something. And most people are still using bicycles or something else to carry their stuff. But again, still the disadvantage in our countries, we still have the fleet of cars that once in the UK, it is not any good anymore. It comes to my country. So we have fleets of 1990, which are had very poor exhausts and very dangerous to the environment. So the future, yes, but until the energy mix, the share of renewables goes higher, then most of the solutions we are talking about are just washing, like, just a buzzword. Because everything you talk about electrical, that it will go electrical, the question is, where will the electricity come from? And if that answer is still a fossil fuel source, then you've not solved anything. You've just put a bandage on a wound, but you've not healed anything.
Yeah, that's
well. This is where it's important to do the complete calculation. It shouldn't be something that makes you think, well, there we go, I've solved that. But as a step on the way. So if you generate electrical power at a power station running on gas or oil, hopefully not coal, but and you generate it at sufficiently good thermal efficiency, and you have all the exhaust treatment and scrubbing that it's possible to have to minimize the deleterious effects of the exhaust. And if the electrical transmission losses down the high voltage 30 kilovolt wires to where people charge up their Tesla or their Renault Zoe or whatever it is, if the losses can be kept small enough such that the balance of the whole thing is less damaging than having a little combustion engine in every single car, then it's an improvement. But it's not, but it shouldn't be taken as being the answer in the end game. If we're talking about electric cars in France, brilliant, because 80%, I think, or something like that, of the energy generated is from nuclear, if you put aside the fact that you've got to think of a safe way of burying a whole load of really filthy stuff for 200,000 years until it's harmless again, which is, that used to be a big problem. Now it's kind of easy. It's possible to do it, but again, this is where the point I made earlier about cooperation is, I think, quite important. You've got to look at things in the round, but there won't be a one type solution for everything.
Yes, John. I think that's what we should communicate as people like sitting on this panel, experts or whatever people, an improvement in efficiency, an improvement in what, than just saying we will achieve this in this without giving that what is that, because it's the same thing as net zero. Will we achieve it? Maybe sometime, but what are the incremental steps to get there than just saying this is the plan of net zero? It's going to take a while, and we have to explain to the people, because the whole point which delays everything is the masses that don't understand it, not have the right knowledge to make decisions. So if I say, yes, we'll have an electric car by 2050, by not explain how does that change from the combustion one, and someone is understanding, I like my stick, I want to stick to it and everything, you have to explain why they should make that change. Because if we don't explain, then also the behavior, which is the most important thing after all the innovations we can make, if the behavior of the person using that does not change, then we have also not achieved anything. So I think for behavior to change, we have to go into explaining of what are the improvements, rather than saying we will solve this, which usually in the global, politics or whatever, that's what we want to use. We will solve this by doing this, but without explaining, is it an ending or solution, or it's just on a step along the way? Yeah. I think we're meant to.
Josephine, thank you so much. You've kind of brought us a full circle there, back to net zero. So we're getting to 7 o'clock, so we've got time for just one more question. Is there anything from the audience? Okay, so I wanted to sort of wrap up and bring back to your point there, Josephine, that, I mean, we're looking at incremental improvements and there's no one solution, as I know you've always said time and again. But the question is, why should people make that change and change in behavior? So how, being a bit more positive, how can we as individuals, companies, communities foster that environment that will allow people to make sustainable developments, either in their own lifestyle or in design or policy or economy?
I think we start by empowering them with knowledge, awareness. If I'm not aware of anything, I'll have my propaganda. And now anybody has become an expert with the social media, that world we live in, or that telephone world, which I'm part of. But yeah, I can write anything and it will become fact. You saw what happened in COVID, which people still have right regimens, but I tell my neighbor, the vaccine is not good for you, and they will not take it. They choose not to take it because somebody, AB, said so. Or polio in my country, which is a deadly disease. If someone just says because of their former beliefs, someone is trying to kill us with the vaccine, and then they'll not immunize somebody, and before you know it, people are dying of a disease that is preventable. So without awareness, we cannot do it, and awareness with the right facts. Because as I said, again, anyone is an expert. I can read something off Wikipedia and try to inform my neighbor, but is it true? So there should be the right facts and very, because I'm speaking also from the scientists, as scientists, we try also to overestimate what we can achieve. So, and that's, I think, what has happened with the climate change talk. There's a lot of faith put in science, which at the moment is not true. Yeah, we may achieve it in future, but at the moment it's not true. So I think we should inform the people who are not with the right facts, which is achievable now. What can we achieve tomorrow? And with that awareness, we can give them the decision to make the decision themselves. As Polly said, is that companies now, when she was answering the gentleman's question, what is pushing companies now to change is the necessity of being pushed by a population that is more informed of the climate problem. So because of that, where they are pushing their companies to buy from M&Ms, I'm asking, are their clothes sustainable? And then I understand that, then I buy from it instead of H&M. So it's having the knowledge and then choosing that help. Without that, we will not achieve it.
Thank you. So there's time for probably, one brief point from each of you. So in reverse order, Emma, did you have anything to bring in on this? How can we foster that sustainable
I think that's a really good question, and I'll try and be brief. Think about who your communities are, like who listens to you. Where do you have influence? Kind of at work, at clubs, in your village. And we need to think, we can all be policymakers. I think if you get to make a decision or influence a decision outside of your immediate family, you can think of yourself as a policymaker. And so at work, can you get your company or employer to switch to a renewable energy contract? Can you get them to change the catering so it's default vegetarian? Your local kind of clubs and villages, can you start a bike swap or a car sharing scheme, or cycling kids to school, sort of bike buses, I think they're called. And so I think there's lots of debates around individual change and versus system change, and we need both, but also thinking about your communities. That's quite a nice place in the middle to start. And also pick things that you think you're going to enjoy. Like if you really, really hate biking, start with trying cooking some vegan meals and vice versa. And I think, finding sort of joy and community as much as possible, because it is heavy stuff.
Thank you, Emma. John.
I think it's so we've got a great heritage in this country, great history of doing engineering stuff, doing scientific stuff, some very notable people who did more in one lifetime than a lot of people could ever imagine was possible. But I'm always foxed by the fact that governments don't seem to push engineering, don't have a lot of scientists and engineers amongst their ministries. So one of my key things would be, as we are doing together, getting underway with, is getting the promotion and the explanation, description of what engineering and scientific and technological disciplines are. The fact that that there's an immense amount of scope to do neat things, and as you said, all of the problems to try and tackle climate and energy and new energies, they're absolutely fascinating. And everything that I've done in a career with crazy stuff for racing cars. And I'm not saying this just to be cheesy or try. It feels like a kind of lead in to the really big one, you know, because such a monumental beneficial effect could be created by solving a lot of these problems, synthesizing the fuel, sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, or whatever it might be. But I think we need to do much more to promote and get kids interested in those kind of things, rather than being footballers or YouTube sensations.
Thank you. And finally, Polly.
Mine's a bit more of carrot and stick, if you like, and perhaps it's a stick first. I think that people all around the world of all generations are realizing now that the current model we have is bust. And now we're feeling it and seeing it with floods, storms, fires, and migrations to across continents for people who are unwilling, and rightly so, to accept that deprivation that is being our current model of economic models have inflicted on them, and our environmental crisis that's been generated. And I think that gives people more incentive to want to support leaders who are offering us a more distributive, regenerative, circular economy. I'm not saying it's easy right now. Here in the UK, we have just elected a prime minister and a cabinet that seems to be perhaps politely they're pedaling in the opposite direction. But in due course, and my hopes are set on young people in particular, there will be a rising demand from people to change the model that is so fundamentally broken. And I think I love Emma's crusading campaigning vigor, which is that we have to fight for this, and more people will fight for it. And in the end, I believe, perhaps optimistically, that we will shift the dial. Perhaps we won't get there as far as we would like to get, but we will definitely shift the dial.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's a great roundup, like empowering people, thinking of ourselves as individuals, as policymakers, promoting technical disciplines, especially with the young, and supporting leaders of a circular economy. So, I mean, there's plenty for us all to fight for. That wraps up our discussion today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And just in case you were wondering, even if you gave up showering for the rest of your life, you would never come close to producing the same ecological impact as you would if you simply gave up animal products. So we've got a bit of a break before dinner or the wine tasting at 7:30. We hope you'll be able to continue those conversations on there. If you're around tomorrow, we have informal refreshments in the buttery if you'd like to meet with myself and Malcolm as a congregation point for chatting engineering sustainability. We'll be there. We'd love to see you. That's 11 in the buttery. At 2 p.m, we got a lecture with Mike Gascoigne, the future of carbon-free aviation, and our 4 p.m. panel discussion reflecting on 50 years of the admission of women to Churchill College. So it's been great having you all with us today. If you could put your hands together again to thank our panel, and thank you.